A plane lands, and a Colombian, Rodrigo, confidently tells customs his identity, stating he has no base, is seeking refuge, and has come with some contraband into his foreign touchdown. The customs officer replies they can have his luggage searched for the so-called contrabands, but Rodrigo remains without a care, wearing a smile as he's handed back his passport. He lies his way through getting a concierge to think he's a Mr. Jackson from West Africa, who happens to be Caucasian. At a restaurant with his friend Max, Rodrigo's take is that everyone lies. He maintained his lie as far as the embassy where he pretended to look for his car when he and the concierge got to Roissy. Max asks him if he's going to see a lady friend again, and his reply is that he'll make plans by Saturday. By Sunday they should have had their casual encounter, and life continues on Monday. For Rodrigo, he's moved by the thrill of the challenge his wildlife offers. Being someone else is more of a challenge and more fun than being himself. Max admits that he does have an irresistible charm, but there have to be perks to Rodrigo just being himself. He jokes that maybe Rodrigo is just scared he won't be able to be as charming with the ladies if he were just himself. Rodrigo in response taps a waiter's behind, earning no reaction from her, but a chuckle from his friend. Rodrigo receives a call that changes his demeanor. It's about his mother. Max asks if he's reconciled with her, but that won't be possible because she's passed away. Rodrigo abandons his lunch with Max and meets up with the burial rites, earning a few stares for being nonchalant about it too. His father chose not to come, and his brother hands him the keys to their mother's house to visit before they have to sell it, because he believes that's what their mother would have wanted. He goes to his mother's place and starts going through her things, finding a letter, photographs with cut-out faces, and a necklace he will seemingly keep from the way he holds onto it. He puts on the stereo, and a song starts blaring through. It's loud enough that he doesn't hear someone creep into the apartment. She stands by the entrance, watching him groove, throwing his hands left and right to the rhythm. She contemplates leaving, but is intrigued by his jarring movements enough to watch a little longer. He finally turns back, notices her, and cuts the music. She apologizes for intruding, explaining she's his new neighbor and needed someone to help her move her dresser. He offers to help, but she tells him not to worry as she'll manage it herself. She adds that she's a caretaker for people in his condition and is currently in need of a job. It takes him a few moments to realize he's seated in his mother's wheelchair and his neighbor is assuming he's handicapped. He decides he'll play along, knocking down some of his mother's stuff when he rolls out of the wheelchair. She goes down to pick up the fallen stuff, obliviously giving him a nice view of her cleavage. Her name is Julie. He explains the name Odette on the entrance door is his mother's. He tells her she's deceased, and the apartment is hers. He lives alone here now with her memories. It's a pitiful story Julie falls for, and has no reason to doubt him when he introduces himself as Jocelyn. He continues to ogle her, as she extends hospitality should he require it. But in the meantime, she doesn't want to be a bother and head back to her place. Once the door shuts, Rodrigo now gets up and does a happy dance. In a new scene, his friend and consultant, Max, is up to date about Jocelyn's latest tricks. Exasperated, he lets Jocelyn know his medical examination is in the clear. Jocelyn is a healthy, misogynistic 50-year-old, in denial of his age. Julie will be another challenge for him to conquer. Max is curious about what new tricks Jocelyn will pull with Julie when they reach the intimacy bridge, but Jocelyn denies he's pulling any tricks to begin with. He feigns ignorance and mandates that whatever happens. Jocelyn goes to work and addresses his staff in a board meeting. He's just as carefree as he is outside work, not bothering to query a worker who comes in late for the meeting. After work, he heads back, humming happily and calling his reflection in the rearview mirror a rascal. He goes to Julie's apartment in the wheelchair and invites her over for a cup of coffee. She accepts and stays in the living room, air-drying her nails she'd been doing, while Jocelyn struggles long enough in the kitchen. At some point, he gets out of the chair and quickly goes about the coffee, calling out to ask how she would prefer hers, while she curiously fiddles with a pack of adult diapers she's found. With the coffee ready, they get talking. He'd paid attention to the details of how she likes her coffee, and she commends it. In the process, he almost slips out of his lie, revealing he's actually preparing for a marathon. She's still very much unemployed, and he claims so is he, because he's disabled. Julie doesn't feel his disability should be a hindrance to living a normal life. As for relationships, they're both not married. Julie is into casual encounters, preferably with no attachment or need for lies. He asks her about her plans for the evening, and she replies she'll go to the ice rink with a couple of her young friends. While seeing her off, Jocelyn, mesmerized by her body form, admits he lied. He actually does have a job as a general manager of a shoe brand company and hopes this revelation makes him seem less worthless. Julie tells him her parents are having a barbecue that coming Sunday and asks if he would like to attend. He struggles for words, and she gives him a bubbly smile before heading back into her apartment. Jocelyn parks his car at a crossroad, gets out, and sighs. He sets up the wheelchair and ignores a stranger who has caught him in his lie. With a large bouquet of flowers on his lap, he starts wheeling himself down the road, huffing and puffing and asking himself what on earth he's doing. A barking dog comes to greet him. Julie hears the commotion and helps wheel Jocelyn. She's surprised, asking if he wheeled himself all the way, but he admits he parked his car up front. They both agree that's ridiculous, as he could have just driven all the way. Julie's mother welcomes him, assisting him to get to the dining table placed outside for a proper conversation. She's as scatterbrained as Julie, and remarks Julie has been praying to find someone to care for, suggesting his misfortune is her prayer answered. Jocelyn also gets to meet Julie's uncle, his suspicious and unfriendly wife, and his teenage children who shot spitballs at him while he was being wheeled in. But it's not a full house until Florence, Julie's older sister, announces herself. Jocelyn gets tongue-tied seeing she's disabled. Julie remarks, Florence is single, and subtly hints both Jocelyn and Florence could get to know themselves better. Jocelyn and Florence are left outdoors on the porch with the threat of rain. He relays he's the general manager for a sportswear brand, and it makes Florence throw a joke about selling wheels instead. She plays tennis and is a violinist. Not a soloist though, so she doesn't have to get up to greet people. She voices that she plays globally, but Jocelyn is more of a modern music kind of guy. The conversation continues until Julie calls them in for a game of Monopoly. Jocelyn relays his tricks gone south to Max. Max comments he's gone too far, but Jocelyn infers there's no turning back now. He can't fathom just coming out with the truth, and figures the only way is to endure the heat. He remarks, it's nothing he can't handle. Max doesn't agree, stating Jocelyn is playing a game he's bound to lose. Not only has he lied about being handicapped, he's also lied about his age. Max is curious about if Jocelyn finds Florence attractive, but Jocelyn claims he hasn't checked her out. Max advises that he stops going to his mother's house, and he leaves Julie alone. Julie rings Jocelyn's mother's apartment with a pair of gloves Jocelyn forgot at her place, expecting to see him answer the door. His brother answers instead and introduces himself, not in the loop about Jocelyn's lies. Julie notices the wheelchair she believes belongs to Jocelyn, and it's then Jocelyn's brother realizes Jocelyn is playing games. He invites Julie in, deciding not to rat his brother out. Julie talks jovially about Jocelyn to his brother. She hopes Jocelyn and Florence can become an item since they're both disabled. She asks his brother how Jocelyn ended up in his situation in the first place. But the brother, wanting no much hand in it, decides Jocelyn will explain himself best to her. Jocelyn goes to the cemetery to visit his beloved mother, and his brother joins him. It starts off with the brother mocking him over his actions, but Jocelyn defends himself, saying no one is good, not even his brother who's trying to chastise him. The brother goes ahead and berates him, pointing out that he plays cruel games. Jocelyn decides to ditch his car and jog his way to work. He's still out of breath when he changes out of his sweaty t-shirt. His secretary walks in on him changing and notifies an unfazed Jocelyn of an appointment he has the following day. His secretary leaves, then quickly returns to inform him he has a disabled visitor who's just come in like she owns the place. Jocelyn has only a few seconds to process before he hurriedly sits on top his desk before Florence comes in. She tells him she had a tennis game close by and thought to locate his company and pay a visit. She apologizes that Julie tried to play matchmaker, but Jocelyn replies he didn't mind meeting her family. She asks why he's seated on his desk, and he huffs, ready to come clean. While trying to find the words to explain his bizarre story, Florence cuts in with her philosophy that disabled people are not like the rest of the world, as it's okay to embrace and accept it. Meanwhile, his secretary tries to get his attention, even though Jocelyn has already told her they have a walkie-talkie for communication, so her actual presence isn't needed. She keeps beckoning on him to come over and Jocelyn insists he can't move. She then finally resorts to the walkie-talkie. Florence gives him an invite to her tennis game, while Mary gives him explicit and embarrassing details about his colonoscopy appointment with his doctor. Florence listens long enough before deciding to head out and give him his privacy. Before she goes, she lets him know that the open shirt look is appealing to her. Jocelyn goes to the building's window that pans out the tennis game for handicapped. He watches Florence and her opponent get ready to face off. He's in the company of an unknown man, who he tries to have small talk with, before realizing his company is deaf. The opponent serves and the ball tallies until Florence loses the serve. Florence wins the second serve, and it goes on like that. Jocelyn, the deaf man, and the other spectators on the field are all engrossed in the game, the crowd cheering and clapping while Jocelyn and his companion nod in approval. After the game, Jocelyn almost runs into Florence and her coach. His saving grace is a wheelchair that happens to be close by. He quickly sinks into it and greets Florence. He has to give a flimsy excuse about his wheelchair being stolen, which Florence doesn't buy. So he stutters that his wheelchair had a fault his secretary will fix, and in the meantime, he just happens to be in hers, if she doesn't mind. A group of disabled head their way, and Florence gestures that Jocelyn can join her and her friends for drinks. Over drinks, Florence introduces her friends who all happen to be active athletes in various fields. Jocelyn throws a fleet of questions, wanting to know how handicapped sports work, curious about the rules that govern how they play and who they play with. Someone asks him if he doesn't play any sports, and he admits that he doesn't. This leads to a ton of berating from everyone around the table on how he should do better by his body. Jocelyn wakes up with a gasp, realizing it was all a dream. He checks his legs and breathes in relief that they still function. He goes on Google and inputs the keywords classical music violin. Mary returns Florence's chair to her at her apartment. She also has a message from Jocelyn that he's grateful for her generosity in lending him her chair, and she played a beautiful match. Florence accepts the compliments and invites Mary in for tea. Awkward Mary and Florence get discussing over a cup of tea. Florence believes Mary is attracted to Jocelyn, and she feels Mary should act on her feelings because Jocelyn ticks all the boxes. She infers that Mary could be holding back because Jocelyn is disabled, and a tongue-twisted Mary can only shake her head feverishly. Mary calls Florence optimistic and feels people who have the short end of the stick are usually more optimistic than others. An angry Mary walks into Jocelyn's office with a flyer for a musical she wants him to attend. Jocelyn doesn't want to, excusing that he has appointments to meet up with as the busy man that he is. Mary notifies that she's rearranged his schedule and cleared up his time, so he'll have no choice but to attend the concert. She isn't a fan of Jocelyn's mind games and knows Florence must obviously see through the cracks. Mary wants her boss to attend the concert and come out with both the truth and an apology to Florence. To that effect, she's prepared a suit for him. Jocelyn dresses up and battles with his conscience while at the reception of the building for the opera. He approaches the front desk and tries to communicate with them that he would like a wheelchair for his time there. The language barrier brings a lot of confusion about what he's asking for, but eventually they pick on it, and it seems Jocelyn's tricks will remain in full swing. Jocelyn arrives in the booth in a scooter-like wheelchair just in time for the opening act to conclude, and for Florence in a dazzling blue gown to take the spotlight. The crowd is pin-drop quiet in anticipation. Jocelyn's phone ringing pierces through, and he scrambles to turn it off. He tells the woman next to him that his phone wasn't on silent mode because he's a gynecologist. Even though she didn't ask, Florence starts playing, and a mesmerized Jocelyn borrows his seatmate's binoculars to watch her. Jocelyn eagerly waits for Florence outside. She comes out surprised to see him, and he easily lies that he just happened to have business in Prague and thought to stop by. He lets her know he saw the performance that he thinks was spectacular. Some guy invites Florence for dinner that Florence agrees to. She bids him a good night and starts to leave, but turns around on a second thought to ask if they can't possibly have dinner together. Jocelyn is thrilled by the idea. Over dinner, Florence finds it hard to believe that Jocelyn happened to stumble into her show while on a business trip. He insists he's telling the truth, just happening to randomly browse operas to attend and landing in the very one she was performing at. He turns the table, stating she's the one untruthful, as she claimed not to be a soloist. She chuckles and explains she was filling in the shoes for the actual soloist that fell sick. The waiter brings a bottle of champagne, and Florence proposes they get drunk. They toast, or at least raise their glasses to do so, when Jocelyn accidentally trails his hand on the controls of his automobile, and he bumps into the nearest table, causing squeals and apologies. He and Florence are able to resume their toast. A new performance breaks out at the balcony that oversees their outdoor dinner, and it makes Florence extra jovial, smiling and moving to the performer's song. Florence brings up relationships, wanting to know if Jocelyn is truly single, and he affirms that he has no one else but his best friend, Max. Florence will be home the following day, but will join the other performers to take the long trip home via the tour bus. It's a 15 hours long trip by road, and this shocks Jocelyn, who thinks a flight would be much easier. Florence explains the tour bus will be entertaining with the company of other performers, providing an array of things for them to do while they travel. He blurts out he could never sit through such a long trip. But Florence takes it as a joke, even as he tries to patch up the slip in his almost caught lies. The female performer takes the spotlight, and Jocelyn recognizes the instrumentals. It's his mom's favorite song, the same song he'd been bopping to when Julie first walked in on him. The performer approaches him and finds him fondly singing along, so she hands him the microphone to carry on. He words the lyrics perfectly, but hands back the microphone at some point, having enough of the attention. Maybe not quite, as Florence stares at him with a frozen smile and intense admiration that makes him squirm further in his chair. The pair go sightseeing a beautiful lake with a bridge. Florence has heels she voices, makes her feel like she's danced. They keep up the fun till the break of dawn. Jocelyn spots Florence's hotel, and Florence invites him in for yet another drink. The elevator ride isn't enough for 2 wheelchairs, so Florence goes up first while Jocelyn has a battle of conscience before joining her. He meets her on the hallway to her hotel room and decides he won't be spending the night. He goes in for a kiss, turned a last-minute peck on the cheek, before handing over her shoes and taking his leave. Florence watches him from her window wheel down the quiet road, under a light shower of rain. The next day, Jocelyn is back home, jogging his way to work while Florence is on her tour bus. When Florence gets home, she relays her time with Jocelyn, her analysis that he's a green flag so far. Her sister Julie is thrilled that Florence has found someone special, alluding that against logic, she's done so before her, who isn't handicapped. There's a party to celebrate Jocelyn's marathon event. He arrives with Max, but is far from a party mood. Mary comes to his corner, wanting to know how it went down. He admits he's still living a lie, but business-wise, the contract that took him to Prague has been signed. Jocelyn heads home and puts on classical music. He has Florence's number on a piece of paper and takes to calling her to arrange dinner. She agrees, and jokingly comments he sounds like someone that can suddenly walk. A guilt-driven Jocelyn quickly discards her claims, but regardless, dinner will still hold, both excited at their different ends. Before dinner with Florence, Jocelyn has lunch with Max at their usual spot. Jocelyn explains his worries as he's invited Florence to his place and wonders what to expect should they both feel the sexual tension kicking in. Max gives him a full download on how intimacy with paralysis works, pre-studied because he knows Jocelyn well enough to have eventually asked. Jocelyn sees things have become too complicated and mandates he'll tell Florence the truth. At this point, Max highly doubts. Florence shows up at Jocelyn's place for their dinner date. He has slow music playing and warm lighting decorating the place. He has a champagne bottle in his laps and with groans of effort wheels about searching for a champagne bucket to put it in. In his efforts to find one, they end up in a room with a piano, and Florence reveals one of her many talents. She can play the piano, although she claims not so well. She's obliviously playing still when Jocelyn gets out the wheelchair, ready for her to turn around. He develops cold feet and sits back down before she eventually turns around. It's a romantic setup with lit candles around the small table. Over their flute of champagne, Florence thinks it's safe to discuss how Jocelyn ended up in a wheelchair. Once again, he lies that he had a horse riding accident. Oblivious Jocelyn believes him, even commending his effort to discuss it in a breezy manner. As for her, it was an unfortunate freak accident. The conversation makes Jocelyn uneasy, and he tries to gather up courage to tell her the truth. Before he can, Florence opens up about a dating experience that went sour. She was betrayed by a firefighter. She paid him a surprise visit on his birthday and caught him with another woman. He tried to apologize several times, but her mind was made up on not going back. Jocelyn appeals that she could have given him a second chance, but Florence doesn't see how that could have been possible. The firefighter lied to her, and that was unacceptable. She reminds Jocelyn he had something to say, and he inquires if she knows how to swim. Turns out the table was set over the swimming pool, and with a push on the remote control, the ground gives way to the water. Florence is stunned, holding adoringly to the floater Jocelyn hands her. He has one too, and they float, gazing at each other until Jocelyn makes the move and kisses her. Afterwards, they lay next to each other, with towels offering modesty. They reference their intimate moment and decide on both ends that it was good. During Jocelyn's next colonoscopy appointment, he finally admits he's gone too far and doesn't know how to put an end to his lies. The fact that she's handicapped makes him feel extra guilty. Max retorts that Jocelyn is blind to the fact that he's falling in love. Jocelyn, Mary, and Max are driving to see Florence because Florence wanted Jocelyn to bring his friends. Max doesn't like being dragged into the lie and promises that if Jocelyn doesn't come out with the truth, he will. They arrive at a Chinese-themed restaurant, and Mary makes the table awkward by rambling and laughing nervously, while Jocelyn fruitlessly tries to distract Florence from Mary's ignorance. One of Florence's opera friends finds their table and greets them. He's in the company of another man who's really tall enough for people to glare at. When the opera friend and his companion leaves, Max deems it time to tell Florence the truth. Jocelyn purposely causes an accident and asks Max to take him to the bathroom to clean up. In there, Max calls him a coward, but Jocelyn pleads that now isn't the best time. Florence's opera friend comes into the restroom, and Jocelyn quickly sits on the toilet seat to keep up the pretense. Meanwhile, Jocelyn's brother shows up at Julie's apartment with a bouquet of flowers. A furious Julie finds Jocelyn at an outdoor eatery and slaps him, shocking onlookers. The gig is up. He might be in a wheelchair, but she knows he can walk. She tells him he has 48 hours to come clean to Florence, and do it without breaking her heart if possible. She starts to walk away when Jocelyn gets out of his chair and calls after her. He would prefer Julie broke the news to Florence, but Julie isn't having that. His mess, his fixing. It was his brother who finally snitched. Jocelyn goes to see his father at a care home, and it's clear where Jocelyn gets his womanizing habits from. Jocelyn relays his issue to his father, who comes up with the option of taking Florence to Lourdes to witness him miraculously walk. Julie accompanies her sister to a lingerie fitting. She struggles to tell Florence the truth, preferring instead to beat around the bush by saying Jocelyn seems like bad news. Florence can't agree. She gets a call from Jocelyn, who wants to meet up at Lourdes. When the call drops, Florence voices that she's no dummy and knows Jocelyn isn't disabled. The giveaway signs were she being disabled and knowing the difference, and also Julie's guilt-ridden face. She chose to entertain him long enough because it was good to feel loved. She knows their trip to Lourdes is to pull a stunt where Jocelyn will miraculously walk. She tells Julie she'll end things with him then. Max, Mary, Jocelyn, and Florence go to Lourdes. They and a mass of disabled people seeking healing follow a priest to a building with large doors. The priest picks Jocelyn to come alone with him into the building. He knows Jocelyn isn't disabled and would prefer people like him didn't come to mock the faith of actual people in need. Jocelyn solemnly starts to leave, curiously asking what gave his lie away. The priest answers that his shoes are worn out. Jocelyn returns to the spectators outside the building, still in a wheelchair. The drive back is silent. They stop to get groceries and Florence almost gets hit by a truck. Luckily, Jocelyn pulls her out of the way, and now the cat is out of the bag. He can walk. She plays along, attributing it to a miracle. And Jocelyn's still very much a coward. Can't come clean and apologize. Life goes on thereafter. Florence is heartbroken. Jocelyn's brother and Julie become a couple, and they visit his mother's grave together. Jocelyn returns to work, rebranding a little. Now his model for his shoes is a disabled man. Jocelyn drives to catch up with Florence's tour bus. He manages to stop it and gets on board simply to apologize to Florence. Mary sees Jocelyn in his office to lament about how unappreciated she is. She deems herself a hardworking assistant that Jocelyn barely notices. It's her birthday, and she's feeling extra sad about the situation. Jocelyn lets her air her mind, watching her tear up before presenting her a gift. The marathon kicks off and Jocelyn struggles to finish it. He loses stamina and falls to the ground, trying to get his bearings. Florence appears to his surprise, and she's as cheery as ever. She hoists him on her thighs, and together they finish the race. The peak of their excitement is a kiss.